Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time to get started. Yeah, 10 a.m. here in Boxford, Massachusetts. A cloudy 10 a.m. in Boxford, Massachusetts. I'm Geoff Besson. Thanks for having me with you. Let me put on my webcam. Seb, are you there as well?
I am. Good morning, everybody. 7 a.m. here in Vegas.
Vegas. It's never morning or nighttime in Vegas. It's always the middle of the day in Vegas. Seb, thanks for joining me. Everybody, thanks for joining us. Every 3 months or so, we gather together some of the most interesting questions we've received in tech support from our customers, etc., and bring those answers to you. Why? Because otherwise we're answering those questions to just that one person, and that's not fair. You need to benefit from this beautiful insight so that everybody can build amazing interactive experiences with Intuiface. So as always, we're using GoToWebinar, which means there's a questions panel typically on the right side of your screen. In that questions panel, you can type questions. So here's what we'll do. Seb is going to do a lot of the talking. I'm more just the MC. Seb will be educating everybody about the nuances of Intuiface. And if at any point you have a question, type it in that questions panel of the GoToWebinar toolbar. I will monitor that panel. We have 4 separate topics to discuss today, and in between each topic, I'll work on some of those questions with Seb. And at the very end, we're going to open it up, and you guys can ask us anything you want, typically on topic, but I guess it doesn't have to be. So what are we going to discuss today? Let's walk through the agenda briefly. First, we're going to talk about the notion of style sheets, this ability to define color schemes and fonts and layout, some things that you can set sort of once and it rolls out to the entire experience. There's actually 2 ways to do that. This is probably goes back years, how to create a style sheet, and Seb's got a couple real interesting approaches for achieving that. Second, probably the deepest topic we'll go into today is creating what we are kind of calling shopping cart visuals. But broadly, that means you have an indeterminate number of items, could be 1, could be 2, could be more. How do you display that variable number of items so they all look well designed and fit properly? It could be a shopping cart, but it could be any scenario where you're adding and removing things from a queue. How do you show those things? How do you display them in a sensible, logical way? Really interesting topic. We'll spend some time on that. Third, just very briefly, some of you are using our analytics capability, some of you are not, and shame on you. Apparently you don't think it's important to see how your project is doing. But if you are, if you're thinking of doing it, one thing that might have occurred to you is, could I embed those dashboards in an Intuiface experience? Can the experience itself show analytics dashboards? And yep, they certainly can. In fact, it's pretty trivial. We'll spend just a moment or 2 explaining that. And then we'll wrap things up with, I think every Q&A will have one of these lesser known feature topics. And today it's going to be player tags. I don't even know if most of you are aware you can tag player. And that is not just about identifying one player from another, distinguishing them for the purposes of deployment. The running experience can see those tags. And not only can it see them, but it can see them in real time. There are ways to query it dynamically, and you can do some really interesting things with player tags. So we're going to wrap it up with that topic. Then, as I said, we'll do just a broad-based Q&A. Seb, I've set the table. The first one is about style sheets. Are you ready to go?
I am. I had some already questions, not on GoToWebinar, but on Slack, seeing that the question box was not active. Hopefully that was just GoToWebinar doing its thing. So if anybody can just say hi using the question box, that will reassure me and make sure that everybody can ask questions. And that being said,
I'm giving you control of the screen, Seb. I will mute my camera and I'll keep an eye on questions.
So share screen, come on. Monitor 1. Hello. Hi, Regis. Hi, Paolo. Thank you, guys. Hey, Alex. Good to see you. All right, we got everybody. Geoff, you can see my screen, my composer.
I see composer, yes.
That sounds good. All right, let's roll. So first of all, style sheets, CSS. You know we don't have CSS in Interface, right? Because you don't write code. So how do you create some kind of graphic reference? And this is a kind of an old technique which I wanted to revisit today because I've seen some questions going on support, on community, and with some customers I've been talking to. And so I want to show you today two techniques that I actually use myself quite often when I build demos for trade shows, new samples from the marketplace, or when I help customers on some projects. The first one would be using experience layers, which is a feature now we've added quite a long time ago in interface. I don't remember which version. And the second one using the design accelerators, which is a lesser known feature, and it is actually way older than experience layers. Before I show these two techniques, one quick, let's call it disclaimer. I'm showing you one way of doing things. This is not the way. That's my way for the kind of projects I work on. And as we don't do a lot of service at Interface, we almost never deliver a project from A to Z. So you might want to adapt what I'm showing you today to your own needs, your own processes, and the way your customers deliver graphic content to you. That being said, there's, probably a difference if you have a graphic chart, like for your customer or yourself that is defined, and you know it's not going to change. Like for us, for Interface, we have these colors. They're not going to change anytime soon. We have our font right away. It's not going to change anytime soon. So that's kind of a given. And then you have some projects where things are more fluid, and the end customer might change its mind before the end of the day, and you might want to do things a little bit different. So first of all, experience layer. As most of you probably know, when you select an experience here at the very top of the scene structure, you can add a foreground or background experience layer. Usually I do a foreground, so I'm sure it's above everything else. And this is where I will add some elements like a color swatch, like some text, which I know I'm going to reuse across my whole experience. In this case, I have just a couple of ellipses with our interface colors, and just the title and the subtitle or paragraph. So once you have that, and if I move to another scene, you'll see that this is available at any time, anywhere. How do I use it? This is where comes the difference, depending on if you know the graphic style will not change or if there's a risk. In my case, usually it doesn't change. So what I do, I need a title. I'm just going to select my title here in my experience layer, do a Control-D, which is the same as right-click and duplicate, Control-C, Control-V, Control-D is faster. Take my title and move it down to my current scene. If I take my title, now I have this title here, and this is my scene title. I already have the font, the color, the size. Usually I will call it good enough for me. In the same philosophy, if I need to create, let's say, a box like this with some rounded corners, I want a white box, and with a colored outline, this color, I will use my picker and to say, I want this blue here. And I have my blue outline. You're just using the picker is, again, good enough for me in most cases. If you have a doubt, or if you think this color might change or this font might change, what you can do instead is, scratch that, I'm going to select a weird color, is use a binding. So if you use a binding here on this outline color, you can do a binding on your experience layer. That was my ellipse 4, I believe, and fill color. Now I'm back to blue. If I select the ellipse number 4 and I were to change this color, you can see that the two are changing at the same time. I just broke my design, but so same thing for the title. If Railway is the font you're using right now, like you want to make sure that, okay, sometimes they want to change to Arial or Times New Roman, you can select your title and then use the binding on the font, the color, the size, all the properties you think that might change in the future if you're more in a proof of concept phase. So either copy and paste or the how's it called? The eyedropper color picker thing to just get the info you need from your swatches, from your quote unquote style sheet. That's option number 1 with the experience layers. And I like this one when I work on a project for a customer and I'm doing just one project for them. That's the solution that I use myself, usually with this copy and paste or color picker, because I don't need the binding. Now, option number 2 is more if, as a company, you're building multiple projects for yourself, or as an integrator, you are doing multiple projects for a given customer. My example for us is our interface samples, the samples we have on our trade shows, using the design accelerator. So building something that you know you're going to reuse across multiple experiences and not just across multiple scenes like we did with the experience layer. In that case, I'm building design accelerators. So if you open this panel in your composer, you will see maybe 5 bundles, I believe. You can get more, you can download them, but the really important thing is that you can create your own ones. So if we look here, I have my own interface samples. This one is visible example, red title. Let's say I want to have a red title in all my slides. That's the one I want to use. I can just drag and drop this, and it's a text, which I already set to tips and tricks, to the font, railway semi-bold, 76 font size, etc. That's a very simple DA, design accelerator, DA. Just one text asset, some properties set. When I was working on the user conference, I had 4 sessions. I built this agenda DA. If I click on that, now I have a whole new scene with a title, a subtitle, and some bullet points. So you can have something as easy as one asset, or multiple assets, or even a whole scene saved as a DA, as a design accelerator. How you do that? You select the items you want to put into your design accelerator. Let's say I want these 3 texts, and you hit create. Give it a name, give it a name of a bundle, interface samples here, and it will appear as a new icon, and you can reuse that in any experience, any project in your composer. So again, if you need some style elements that you want to reuse across multiple experiences on the long run, the DA might be a better option than the experience layer. Geoff, I think that covers the style sheets. Do we have any questions about that just yet? Or do you have any comments on that? Did I miss something?
No questions yet. I had a comment, and the camera's also very dark. So maybe I can fix that in the meantime. Design accelerators. So talk about obscure topics. That might be one where not a lot of people are familiar with it. So as I recall, design accelerators, they're device specific though, right? If I create them, they're local to my PC. It's not like they're on the network or in the cloud, correct?
That's correct. But if you want to share them with your colleagues, you can always go to that folder on your drive. I can try to show you that into interface, additional content, design accelerators, whatever version, and this is where your DAs are. So if I look into my interface samples, this is where I have mine.
So what do they show me? They cancel. What do they copy?
So the whole folder will go into whatever version you had. I used that a while ago, so I'm still stuck in 6.4. But even if you put them in here in 6.4 and you're running a 7.0.10, which I'm running right now, you will see them appear in your menus here after restarting Composer. We have a Help Center article explaining how to do that. And speaking of which, I forgot to mention that we also have, if you search style sheet, how to create a style sheet scene.
Oh yeah.
We do have this article, which was updated 2 days ago because we care about the webinar for information to be up to date. And this is showing just one technique. So this article is going to change again in the next couple of days to reflect the different methods that I mentioned today. In here, as of right now, you will see the experience layer one with the binding one. So the one, if you are not sure about your graphic style and you want to make future changes easier by changing, only the color in your experience layer, and it reflects on all the items which are bound to your experience layer assets. But we're going to show all the methods here okay. In the article, I mean.
So you presented 2 techniques. Design accelerators are essentially a method for going cross-project. The first method design accelerators are cross-project, experience layers are sort of within the same project. I mean, that's the main difference.
Yeah, but to me, it is. Again, that's more a personal opinion based on my own experience of building projects with interface than a rule. If you want to use DAs, design accelerators within one project, you totally can.
I think one of the techniques you used here that doesn't occur to a lot of people is taking advantage of the portions of the canvas outside what the person can see. I mean, you have access to everything around the visible canvas, and you can use that. I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a great example. I mean, look at all the extra room you have.
Thanks for pointing it out, because I do it without even thinking about doing it again, and I forgot to mention it. Yes, you can put things outside of the box. So the black border that you can see here is like the bounding box, or the boundaries of your scene, and anything you put outside will just not be visible. So if I hit play, you will not see what's in this gray area here. You will just see what's inside the scene. And after you're done, after the project is done, you can just hide the layer in case you have future modifications to do. Or if you did not use the binding, you can delete the layer. If you use the bindings, don't do that. Keep the layer. You can have it.
That's an important point. Yeah. And maybe this is just for me, but if I have a lot of stuff in the experience layer, from an execution perspective, from running the experience, is hiding that experience layer going to help somehow? If I have, I'm going to make it up, just an extreme example. I have 10 videos, 4K videos surrounding my experience. If I hide that experience layer, does that help performance in any way? If that's visible?
The videos are in the scene, not in the experience layer, right?
No, either way, I don't know if the answer is different, then I'll ask both questions.
It is, because I wouldn't put a video in such an experience layer. Video is not really a style sheet element. It's more like text, colors, maybe a logo, something like that. Definitely not a video. Performance-wise, all the elements in an experience layer will be loaded at the very beginning. So if it has an impact, it's like adding a few milliseconds when loading the first scene at the very beginning, and then that's it. It's loaded for all the lifetime of your project while it's running in play mode.
Okay, all right. That's great. So I had a lot of questions. I don't know, but I tell you what, there is a question here. In light of the time, why don't we move on, Seb, and we'll return to that question at the end. Okay.
Yeah, I see there's a question from Alex, and it's actually a pretty good one.
All right, go ahead.
So, did you say you can have a DA create a scene? Yes. To do that, instead of selecting, all the assets like this and hitting the create an accelerator, don't do that. Just select the scene itself and hit the create an accelerator. This will create the scene and all the layers within the scene and all the assets within these layers into this DA. Second part of your question, can you put an experience layer in a DA? No, unfortunately no, because we introduced the experience layers way after the concept of DA, and we have not updated the DA concept since. So you can put an asset, multiple assets, a layer, scene. Scene will include all its layers. You cannot put an experience layer. Now what you can do is say, if you create a scene with this agenda and you call this is my layer that I want as an experience layer, right click, set as experience layer. So it's easy enough to convert a layer to an experience layer, which is why we did not make this improvement.
Thanks, Seb. There's a couple other questions, but I'll answer those in line. Why don't you jump to the next topic?
Sounds good. All right, because that's the big one. Item comparison. So I've prepared the scene in advance, and I will go through all the things I did. But first thing first, let me jump into play mode, so it might be a bit easier to understand what we're talking about. Use case scenario. You have a list of items. I have 9 items here on my left, and I want to put them to compare them somehow. I want to select 1, 2, or 3, and to make a comparison between these items. And so if I select 1, 2, and 3, I can have 3 items, and maybe I want to open them as a comparison sheet, something like that, side by side. Side note, second part of the demo is using RFID, because lift and learn, that's kind of the things you want to do, right? So how does that work, and why do we see a shopping list here? The thing is, again, you have many ways of addressing this scenario. The way I chose is to use the shopping list interface asset as the business logic, the brain behind this comparison engine. Why is that? You have n items, 9 in this case. You want to pick 1, 2, or 3. You want to add these 1, 2, or 3 into a list, your comparison list, and you want to be able to add items to and to remove items from that list. Well, that's what the shopping list does already. It's not because it's called shopping list that you have to use it as a shopping list. It's a dynamic list in which you can add items with the add method. You can remove items, and just don't use the quantity, don't use the price. Don't use the create email body. You don't care about that. Just use this notion of adding and removing items from the list. Now, when I add again these 3 items here, and I click this open comparison, what are we looking at here? And I will go into edit mode to show you that. But this is an asset grid, horizontal, with just a different template of your shopping list item. So this list that you're looking at here, 1, 2, and 3, is the exact same data feed than this list here, 1, 2, and 3. Different shape, different template, same data, same content. So let me go in edit mode and explain a little bit more how that works. So we have our shopping list here, and I just did a very basic drag and drop of the interface asset. That's the default design for the shopping list to visualize what we're working with. Of course, you would not use such a list to display your comparison, your compared items. You will use this other list here, which I have created, which is empty because it's a shopping list, and by design, shopping list is empty. In here, I have my data. Right now, this one is coming from Excel. It could come from the headless CMS. It could come from a third-party API. I happened to prepare this demo in the middle of the desert with no internet connection, so Excel was kind of a good idea for me at that time. But I'm using Excel. Again, you can use any kind of data source provided you have fields. In this case, each item has an image, a name, a description. I mean, if you've watched some of the webinars, you know the vintage cars already pretty well. I did add a new column, RFID tag. That's for the next scene. We'll come back to that. So in our template, we have this compare button. And what does it do? When the button is checked, we are actually adding an item to the shopping list. We are using this add item action. The ID needs to be a unique identifier. I'm using the artwork name because I know my artwork names are unique in this data feed. And then you pass the parameters that you need for your comparison. And that's where the shopping list is either 100% good for you, good enough for you. You just have a name, a description, and a price to compare. Totally fine. Or it's a good basis. If you were comparing mobile phones, either you had a very long text description of multiple lines and you put this text side by side, and that's okay. Then you can use the shopping list as is. Or you want a full technical matrix like you would find on GSM Arena or any phone comparison websites with dozens of lines, and you want to be able to put them really in front of each other. So instead of a name, description, image, like 3 or 4 parameters, you might need 10. Then you will need to write some code. You will need to enhance the shopping list to make the code of the shopping list your code for your phone super comparator, a super comparison tool. And that's fine. That's the purpose of building custom interface assets. I'm just saying here that the shopping list is a very good basis to work on because it already has all these mechanisms of adding items, removing items, clearing the list, and displaying this list through data templates. For our example, we are just using the name, description, and price, and the image, of course, and that's more than enough for us. So when the button is checked, we are adding the item using the artwork name as the ID. When the button is unchecked, we are removing the item using, again, the same artwork name. So we remove the corresponding item from the shopping list. So that's what's happening between the list on the left here coming from Excel or Headless CMS or API Explorer, and the list on the right here, which is our shopping list. Now, a quick word about this additional view, which I have in a second layer, and how to design these templates. I think I showed that in the past, but that's okay. Not every interface user watches every webinar we do. So I'm just going to show that quickly again. In our shopping list, we actually have 2 data feeds, and that's to make the design easier. So if you look at the properties of the shopping list, we have our list of items. That's the true list. And by nature, by design, this list is empty at start, right? Because shopping list, when a cart is always empty when you start your thing. That's why we have a list items design mode with 5 fake items with the exact same structure. So what you can do when you have a collection, the asset grid, using our list items from the shopping list, which is empty by default, switch this data source in the properties here to the design mode. That's how I built my template. Fake image, fake product name, fake description. I can build my template. There are 5 items here. If I were to select, what is it? This here, I have 5 products. All right. And when you're done, when you have edited your template, before saving your project, before hitting play to test your work, don't forget to switch back to the real list items. So it looks empty, but it will get filled when you call this add item action from the Excel template, Headless CMS template, or API Explorer template. This one here on the left. Before I open to the floor to questions, because I'm pretty sure there will be on this topic, using a comparison from a list of items you can pick from is cool, is nice, right, with just a touchscreen. But a very common scenario is to do that using RFID. So I have right next to me my Nextmosphere demo board. You can't see it, but I do have, my RFID tags, tag number, here we go, tag number 1, tag number 2, this way. And both tags are positioned on my readers at the moment. Again, I'm not going to explain the whole thing. I'm just going to hit play. So you see the process, how with the exact same data, same Excel file, same shopping list, we handle our comparison. So actually, I'm just going to open the comparison first. Right now it's empty. I should have put a text like, hey, lift an item from the shelf to start comparing. I am lifting item number 1. I get the first car. I am lifting item number 2. I get both items. I can put number 2 back. I get the first one. I can put number 1 back. Notice I don't care which one I pick, which one I put back, because in the end, all we are looking at are these commands here. It might be small on your screen, but these XRVU001 or 002 in Nextmosphere script language, it means the tag 001 has been picked up, PU for picked up. And when I put it back, I have PB placed back. Now you may have seen in here in the center, at the beginning, I could see the whole list of items, and now I cannot. The reason is if I pick up item number 1, I am actually filtering my Excel file first to know, okay, among my Excel, which one corresponds to the tag number 1. This is the one, and then I'm basically calling the add item on this item. So what I am adding to the shopping list is the vintage traction, the image, but I'm using the PU001, the RFID tag, as the unique ID. So when I get, if you look down there, you're going to see an PB001. I'm putting back the tag. PB001, okay, shopping list, remove the tag that has a PB PU001 in that case. I did a little trick with the IDs. So exact same principle as in here, except now my Excel file is filtered. Add item, remove item, just one extra step to know which item. And that's using the filter. I'm going to show you that in Composer to know that when I'm in here on Exmosphere, each time I get a command which starts with X or PU, so picked up, I'm adding a filter. I want to get the only product in my list where the column RFID tag equals this command, PU001 or PU002. And when this is done, when my filter is done, I'm waiting like 0.2 seconds. I'm hitting the same button we had in our previous scene, the button in the template, which doesn't add item. That was super lazy of me of just doing a copy and paste of the previous scene and just reusing that button because I already had all that set up. Item ID, name, description, etc., etc. So exact same mechanism whether you want to use the RFID or not. It's just adding this little extra step to make the matching between the tag and the item in your data feed. I'm looking at the clock. I'm going to stop talking now and see if you have any questions about either the comparison with the touch, I like to call it the simple one, or with the RFID, and especially about why using a shopping list and how we decided to use that shopping list.
Thank
and
you.
Geoff, your webcam is again going dark.
It ignores the set. I have to reset it every time I come back. I had a few questions. We'll give people time to think about it. Just a small item. You said button, but it's actually a toggle button. I don't know if we have some more novice users of Intuiface on the call. There are two separate assets. One is a button, one is a toggle button. And that's what you're using for compare, right, is the toggle button.
Yeah, on this one, that's what I did. It's true. Just because it's kind of a common thing on user interfaces to say that I can add and I can remove. So check.
There's two states.
And then check.
Well, technically it's 4 states. But, yes, you can be more flexible with that.
Yep.
The data source property, I'm not sure everybody even knew that existed. So for a data feed, any data feed can be assigned any available feed that has been added to the experience, right?
Yes, although, for example, if I take this list here, which is the default shopping list, the way it looks like by default, if I switch from my list items of shopping list to my list items design mode of shopping list, I'm good. By I'm good, I mean all the bindings work because these two list items, the regular one and the design mode, share the exact same structure. If I were to switch this list to my rows of photo list, now I'm breaking all the bindings because my Excel file is completely different from the shopping list. So I should not do that. Hopefully I kept the binding. No, I broke all my bindings. So Control Z, Control Z. There we go.
No, but it introduces, if nothing else, certainly if you're using the headless CMS to create your test data. So you have sort of a test data headless CMS base, and then you switch over to the production data.
That would be slightly different because in the headless CMS between two tables, even if they seem to have the same fields, they do not. Each field is unique, and I'd rather use a variant in the headless CMS base. So you have one list with two variants, test and production, for example. That is the same table. If you try to switch between one table and another table in headless CMS, even if they have like title, description, image, behind the scenes, they have XYZ 1, 2, 3 and whatever else, unique ID, because you can rename the fields in headless CMS. So we can have the same name, they are not the same fields.
Interesting. Okay, that's good to know. All right. Have we done variants? We did variants at a previous Q&A, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
So that's a really cool topic, and all the recordings are online, by the way, on the website. Just one display question. For the comparison scene, that's an asset flow. What are you using here? The shopping list, is that a vertical asset flow? What is that there?
Asset grid. Asset grid.
I'm sorry, I said asset flow. I meant asset grid. That's an asset grid. In both cases, it's an asset grid.
Actually, my Excel list here on the left is a horizontal asset grid on 3 rows. And I know I have only 9 items in this Excel file. Could be a vertical one, doesn't matter. The default list here, so you see what I'm talking about. This one is a vertical asset grid. So each template is this row here. And then if we look list items with our design mode, if I go to my second layer, list items, I'm going to switch to design mode. This is a horizontal asset grid where this time the template is more vertical, like a card shape. But same data source, just a different template. So when you add an item to the list, it is added to both asset grids, all the asset grids that are using the list item as a data source.
And this is a nice example. If there were 4 items, the way it's currently designed, you can just see the 4th item poking through, but it is really, but you could have some sort of conditional. If there's more than 3 items, then show something that says scroll. Could you do something like that?
So that's funny because the audience is not going to believe me, but Geoff did not see my project before I show it today. But look at that. I only add an item if the number of items of the shopping list is less than 3.
You limit it to 3.
I knew you would ask me that question.
But that's one thing to do, is you limit it to 3.
Yeah.
Or whatever the design permits. Whatever the design permits.
Yeah, and if you're getting it checked and that number is greater than or equal to 3, then you could display, sorry, we only allow 3 items in comparison. I mean, you see that in all websites that do comparison.
Yeah. Great.
Especially if you're using this with RFID and with a non-touch screen, where you cannot have people scrolling the lists to look at the others. And when honestly comparing items which are outside of the screen is just not user-friendly. So you could have something where you shrink the size of the items, the more items you add. But again, is it user-friendly? Not really.
In the chat panel, I did put a link to our article about the Nexmosphere interface asset. Nexmosphere is a really cool company, very easy to work with. Seb was showing you what they call the XScript command language. That's how Intuiface talks to Nexmosphere. Nexmosphere talks to Intuiface. They have tons of different kinds of sensors and even some actuators and LED light strips. It's really cool if you're looking to do something like lift and learn. It's inexpensive and easy to implement. All right, Seb, no other questions. So why don't you head on to the next topic, which is about embedding analytics dashboards and experience.
That's going to be a short one. And I do see a question from Alex. I'm going to answer this one very quickly. Wish list item then, dummy design data in LSCMS. Alex, go on community, ask for it. Put it in the wish list, create a new topic there. That's what the community is used for. In the meantime, until you get that wish granted, add a variant, use an Excel CSV to import dummy data. That's the quickest way, and that's what I'm doing also on my end when I work with customers in a brand new headless CMS base. All right. So analytics dashboards. This is this is going to be super quick, but we are in Composer and we are displaying an interface analytics dashboard from a previous experience. So 2 questions: why would you want to do that, and how do you do it? The why is could be a long question, but some use cases that I could think of is showing the live poll result to an audience. So if you have some kind of a quiz, and at the end of the quiz you want to show what other users answered, that's a good way to do that. You collect the answers through the interface analytics, they go to the dashboard, and then you display that same dashboard to the person who answered the quiz. Disclaimer, it takes about 1 and 2 minutes for data to go to the analytics and get into the dashboard. So when they see the dashboard, they will see the previous answers, not including theirs, probably. Second use case, which is one we use ourselves, management experience. This is actually a dashboard of our trade show booth, showing the experiences which were running, some audience measurement. We were using OpenVino. About that, let me zoom on that a little bit. We were running multiple experiences on multiple devices, see which ones were the most active. A lift and learn player. I had a lot of guys playing with RFID on this one. So that's another use case. So second part, how do you do that? Either using an HTML frame asset or using a web browser asset. One or the other, both work the same way. It's more about sizing them and handling the scroll depending on the size of your dashboard or the size of your chart. Because yes, you can decide if you want to share the whole dashboard or just one chart of that dashboard. So on the assets side, I'm talking about the HTML frame, this one here, or the web browser here. On the analytics side, when you go to your dashboard, that's the trade show dashboard. By the way, let me refresh that because we have a brand new trade show dashboard with new dates. But I opened that a bit too much in advance before the webinar. All right, come on. The point is, you can share a dashboard. You can create sharing links from your dashboards, even from this trade show dashboard, the demo one. So if you want to practice that with our own dashboard, you can do that. And you see this dashboard has way more than 5 charts. So if you go into share, you can decide if you want to use all charts, which is probably the link I'm using into this frame here, or one chart. So you can create as many shares as you want, and then you can use either the URL if you're using the web browser, or the iframe code if you're using the HTML frame. And again, decide if I want only one chart, I can pick which chart I want and get that link. That's how it works, super simple, multiple ways and options, different options, so you can play with that. If you don't have a dashboard yet, just use ours to practice if you see any interest into this feature. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say here. It's fairly straightforward.
So maybe you said it and I missed it. It doesn't refresh on its own. I'll fix my visual. Hang on. It doesn't refresh on its own. You have to refresh it, right?
I did not mention that, so that's a good point. Okay. 2 options again. I don't like this answer, but I have to use it a lot. Either you use a timer, like on my HTML frame, I could say on the timer every, I don't know, sometime, make sure it's indefinitely. Then on my frame, HTML frame, set HTML, and you would just reset the same HTML. If you are using the web browser, on the web browser, we do have a reload action, so it's a bit simpler. So that's one option, timer, and then reload the whole thing at the experience level. The other option is at the chart level. So when you look at, let's say, this chart, for example, if you go into the chart options, you have an automatic refresh, and you can set it to 15 minutes, 30 minutes, or more, depending on the kind of frequency. The minimum we have is 15 minutes. So if you want something that refreshes more often, you might want to do it manually on the experience side. Also notice that if you are displaying this web browser in a new scene, like at the end of a quiz, it will load the data each time you load the scene. So you don't have to care about refreshing the data.
That's cool. Just if you're setting it at the chart level, you need to make sure every chart is properly set. It's a per chart kind of setup.
Yep.
You mentioned poll results. So I just wanted to clarify for the audience that, because you had said it takes a minute or two. Well, there are other ways to get poll results you can show right away, which you've done in, I think, a previous Q&A, which is with web triggers, right?
Yeah, correct.
So that means you're getting the results in real time and showing them real time. Go ahead.
Yeah, in any case, it's about how are you getting these poll results? Is it one single kiosk experience and somebody's pressing a button? Or is it a live webinar, as we did in the past, where I was showing a QR code, people were opening an experience on their phone, sending comments to myself through web triggers, So at the moment where you collect the answer, that's also where you decide to log into the analytics. If you only use the analytics, which is completely fine, you will get this full result, this data going into the analytics in 1 to 2 minutes. At the same time, you could decide to collect that data locally, use a counter, use an Excel file, use whatever you want to store it locally and in real time to display the data real time. That's what I was doing in the webinars. I was actually doing both. I was using a counter to get the answers live during the session to show, the linear gauge with the answers. Do you prefer Geoff accent or Seb's accent? This kind of thing. And at the same time, I could see afterwards the result. So I could show to, I don't know, for example, Vincent, hey, we had 82 people voting on the webinar. That was kind of good.
Thank you very much. Looking at the clock, we want to move on. We'll do player tags. Player tags.
Player tags. That sounds good. All right. So two sides of the coin here again. First, what are player tags? How do you set them? And second one, what do you do with them? So first of all, let's go into the My Interface portal where you have access to my players. And here comes a first trick. If you're working on a Windows machine in your composer, as I am right now, you will not see your composer here. The only way to do that is to actually install a player and activate a license. When you do that, your Windows player will appear here and your composer will share the same tags. So if you want to test your work with player tags, you do need a player on your composer device. That being said, when you have a player, you have tags here and you can add as many tags as you want. New tag, hit space or enter, it will add that new tag. A little trick I learned when preparing this webinar: how do you add tags with a space? Like right now, I wanted to add my location, Las Vegas, Nevada, which is 3 words, 2 blanks. If I hit space, I cannot do that. So just use your Windows bar, new blank tag with space, select this and copy that. Go in here, Control V, enter. That's a new trick even for me. I learned that 2 days ago. I didn't know you could do that, but you can, and that's cool. Because now I can set my location to Vegas with a blank. So that's how you can set these tags here in the player. If you have multiple devices and you go into the list view, you can see the tags in here. You can search by tags. So if you want, for example, say location, this is telling me the 2 locations that I have set to my devices. And then you could say select all and then do some action on all devices. So if you have, I don't know, devices in the US, devices in France, you can say I want to select all my devices in the US, and then I want to deploy a certain experience, for example. So that's tags being used in the share and deploy as player tags. That's it. Now, what's cooler than that is to use the tags to add some configuration to a player, to add some metadata, some additional information to a player that can be used within an experience. Let's take the example of location. So I'm using this syntax of key, colon, value, location, colon, Las Vegas, NV. We do have an article that explains how to do that and how to get this Las Vegas part. So the second part of the value part of the pair, it's explained here with a little bit of custom converter script. So you don't need to understand the whole line of code. The only thing is that here, replace that with location in our case. I'm going to show you that in my experience. So back to my composer, I added the system info. This is where you will see your player tags either as a collection, so sales demo location Las Vegas, or as a string with commas between each tag. This player tag string is the one I'm going to use here. So this string here is my whole list of tags. By the way, I'm in Composer. I opened this project like an hour ago. I will not see the new tag unless I hit play, and I will see it in play mode, like this new new tag with space that I just added, or if I want to see it in my composer, I need to close my project and reopen it. So from this list of tags, I'm extracting this Las Vegas NV using the custom script that I showed in the article. Again, basically we are splitting the whole list by commas, looking for the location and getting the right side part of the location. Don't need to understand the whole line, just that's the key location that I'm looking for, this location, and I want to get my Las Vegas NV as the result. When I have this, so this extracted city name, that's how I call my asset. What I just said on my weather interface asset, use this extracted city name as the location. So if I deploy this experience on multiple devices and I change the tag, like Geoff, I can put location Boston, close enough. He will get his own weather with the same experience. And the only way we are changing the settings or the configuration of the experience is through a player tag. So that's a little bit how it works. Now, what are the use cases? Setting an API parameter. Weather location, that's the one we just looked at, could be an API key. On the headless CMS could be a variant. Let's say this experience on these players should use the default language of English, while these other ones should use the default language of Spanish or French. You could use this to apply a filter, so either a variant or a filter to change the content based on that tag. This player should show industry A content. This player should show industry B content. One example, which is very specific, I've used that in the past for a customer of ours. They had an experience, two experiences actually, one for a remote, one for a non-interactive screen. And they had like 10 or 20 setups in the country. How to tell remote A needs to talk to wall A, remote B needs to talk to wall B, etc. And they're using local network triggers, if they were closed environments, closed triggers on Windows. So we had to tell to the remote what is the local IP address of the wall. And IT being IT, of course, every IP addresses were different. So when the guys were going in the field and doing the setup, they would get the IP of the wall, put it into the player tags, and then the remote would grab that information and everything would be managed centrally by the manager. So that's also a way to give information to one device about another one so they can talk to each other. This could work with web triggers, with the name of the player. So it's pretty limitless in terms of use cases. Again, looking at the clock, I'm going to stop here about the player tags and see if we have any questions about that.
Yeah, we'll give people a moment to think about it as I fix my video. I think a big way to think about that, because everything you've done, you could manage using other techniques as well. There would be ways to do it. What's interesting about player tags is you don't need access to Composer. You don't need to anticipate and codify logic into your experience. You can manually control it at any time from the share and deploy console. And so there's a freedom there that other techniques wouldn't have, because you'd have to anticipate them and sort of write them into the experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
right?
sort of. I mean, I think I showed was it in the last Q&A? I believe so. How to use a headless CMS table as a kind of a lookup table for these kind of settings. So you could have a list of locations and you do an association between player name, location, like Seb desktop should be Vegas, Geoff laptop should be Boston. And based on that, you would adjust which content, which variant, which filter you apply to your headless CMS content. So lookup table in headless CMS is completely valid too. Player tags is just another way. We like to give people options about how they want to give this additional bit of information to a player so it knows what to do. The end goal is to prevent people from creating one experience for player one, one experience for player two, one experience for player three. I'm fighting against that. We want some things that is scalable, that is reliable, that when you do a change in one experience, you do it for all of your players, and that's the most efficient way of working.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'll just also point out the risk with player tags, of course, is to change it. You need access to the share and deploy console. Well, you better have the right to access it, otherwise people can screw with your deployment, which is not good.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure only the right people can do that. I
Yeah,
see no other
where-
questions in the queue, Seb. There was one asked earlier that I tabled for now, so we'll address that. We're already kind of over time, but it looks like most people have stuck around with us, so that's great. We were talking about using the shopping list as a means for managing a dynamic list. You could, in theory, do that with Excel itself, right?
I've done it in the past, so yes, I know I could,
Yeah.
and I know why I won't.
Well, that's the question. So what's the trade-off?
So if you look at an Excel file and at the actions you have on an Excel file, you have add row and you have delete row. So from a high level point of view, you think, hey, it's the same thing as the shopping list, right? You can add a row, you can delete a row, it's adding an item, removing an item, same stuff. Except that the parameter is different. As in, when you want to delete a row, you need to give the row number. So when you add a row to Excel, let's say you have product 1, 2, 3. If you give the row numbers like 1, 2, 3, and you say delete row 2, you will delete row 2. But now your row 3 became row 2 and your numbers are wrong. So if you want to delete row, what used to be row 3, you need to know that in fact it is row 2, and that's a mess. To renumber items, to know which ones you actually want to delete. While with the shopping list, we are not using a row number, we're using an item ID. This identifier, when you add an item or when you remove an item, you give an item ID. So vintage traction, the name of the item, for example. And the logic within the code of the shopping list will browse the list of items, find the one with this item ID, remove it. And there's no question of order or of row numbers. If I then want to delete another one, it still works because I'm asking the list to delete this item, not a specific row item, if that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. Hopefully makes sense to everybody else. Thank you. I was putting a link in chat so that folks know where to find this recording and all previous Q&A live recordings so they can catch up. I don't see any more questions in the queue. We'll give folks another 30 seconds. But it's funny, you know, originally said when we had this agenda, I thought this was going to be a quick webinar, and still it takes.
Yeah, I knew this one was a big piece, the comparison. I still wanted to add the RFID stuff because I believe it's a very common scenario. And actually, Yanis, who just had this question, I knew he was coming today for this one. So that's also why I wanted to add this. That's actually another example of why the shopping list and being able to not care about the order of items is a bit more flexible and safer, because you cannot imagine that people are going to take an item from a shelf, take another one, and put them back in the right order. No, they're going to mix them up, they're going to put them back on the shelf wherever they want. And your experience needs to cope with that. It needs to be able to manage that.
Let me wrap up. I don't see any other questions. I wanted to let you guys know, hopefully you see my screen now.
Yeah.
Seb and I will be in Orlando for Infocom. It's mid-June. Intuiface does not have a booth. We do have partners running Intuiface content. Seb and I will be there as well. If you go to the events page, you see the URL at the bottom here. There is a way to schedule one-on-ones with us. We're there for just about the entirety of the expo, and we'll be busy visiting our partners and hopefully meeting some of you. So if you have any interest and ability to join us in Orlando, please do so. We'll be there, and it'd be awesome to see you guys. I think that's it, Seb. Do you have anything else?
No, sounds like a wrap.
That's a wrap. Thanks, everyone, for joining us again in the chat. I put in the link to the webinars page This recording will be there later today. All the previous Q&A recordings are there as well. Thank you very much for joining us, folks. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.